Hello, everyone. This is Ron Bush, and you're listening or watching the Information Playground. I want to thank you for being with us today. The Information Playground, as you know, if you're a regular listener, the Information Playground is dedicated to all kinds of information. We started out cybersecurity, kind of spread into IT, information technology, and honestly, it's just grown to encompass all different areas. I've got a good friend with us today. He's been with us before. It's Larry Young. He is the owner of Boiling Frog Development and the author of, get this where you can see it, Walk the Sales Plank. It's an excellent book on sales. Larry, welcome. It's great to have you as always.
Good to be back. 2021, exciting, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. The first few days, I'm kind of thinking, I don't know if I want to go forward to 2022 or back to 2019, which I didn't think was a great year, but it's looking great in the rearview mirror. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting, and you can catch me at ronbushconsulting.com. Larry, tell the folks a little bit about yourself. Don't forget, like I did, to tell folks how to reach you or your website.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. Yes, I own Boiling Frog Development, which really is a business development strategy company that really helps clients kind of find the sound of their dream client's voice. And what we do is help them to position their sales efforts and their sales strategies directly in the center of that target market. And so what we end up doing and helping clients is kind of mapping that out, understanding their strategy, and really seeing where they want to go and then reaching that target market. Prior to that, we've talked on some of your episodes, I was really responsible when I was in the corporate world of really rebuilding markets that were dying, left for dead, or weren't performing well, and coming in and really kind of refocusing efforts and building those up. And so those things that I learned over a dozen years are things that I use in Boiling Frog Development and helping clients, find the sound of that dream client's voice and have success. So having fun.
That's great. It's always fun to have you and talk about this. I think we're gonna point to leadership today, which is a favorite topic of mine and obviously one of yours, since you consult in that area and you speak in that area. You are a keynote speaker. You do all kinds of speaking engagements. Of course, we're all doing virtual speaking now, thanks to the pandemic. But let's talk about how you just talked about it. I think you said dream clients. You help your clients find the sound of their dream client's voice and position their sales efforts. I made a note. Tell us how you do that, and what you're seeing post-crisis within businesses across the country.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot. It's the whole gamut. If you go back to, you joked about 2019, businesses were growing. Fundamentally, the economy was doing well. And so you had a lot of people that were just trying to figure out how to do more, with what they were doing. Now that's changed, obviously, in a crisis world. And I can't even say post-crisis world now, really, because we're still feeling it from that respect. You see a lot of different things. I see businesses, Ron, that are just hanging on. They're just getting by, and it's really a challenge to map out a strategy. That strategy tends to be more of really, let's just figure out what we can do to generate revenue as fast as we can, which I draw from that experience I shared with you. You have other companies that have pivoted. They made changes. They're doing things different. What wasn't normal before has now become normal. We talk about in our businesses, virtual. Who'd have thought you do sales training and webinars so virtual, and now not only is that the norm, I don't really even see a lot of that going away. And then you have companies right now, Ron, that are, they've come out with new products and services, things that they've developed by pivoting through this and seeing a different way to earn income. And now they're trying to figure out how to reach that market. And so it's kind of fun for me because I can come in and really understand their strategy, but then, Ron, really focus on how do we map that out? How do we reach that target market, that type of thing. And how do we get there and then execute on that strategy? The other thing I also am seeing is I'm seeing a lot of good, solid companies that are investing in their people. So you probably see that in the keynote and the consulting world, where companies are investing now heavily in their people. They're saying, look, I've got half my staff is virtual and they're at home. How do I train, deal with that, motivate, create culture virtually? How do we succeed in sales virtually? And then you've got others that maybe they're back in the office with the right protocols, and they're trying to figure out, how do we see more success? Because 2020, if anything, there's lots of lessons, but there was kind of a, not a complacency, but a lot of us were just trying to get through. And now you have companies that are saying, well, wait a minute, now I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And how do I grow from that? And how do I develop my people? So those are a lot of the things I'm seeing now. And it's just a great time. It's really a great time to grow.
I appreciate the attitude. There's all kinds of cliches. Your altitude is determined by your attitude, all that kinds of stuff. I'm in cybersecurity world more than any other world. And it is one of the most negative places I can think of, because the attacks are just over the top. The breaches, Foxconn, I think in December, I forget the date, but they paid the highest ransom to ransomware thieves ever paid, $36 million. It's 114, 144, something like that last year. And it just is I guess it's amazing. You, on the other hand, and one of the reasons I like public speaking as a whole, but you're looking at it from a positive standpoint. And I think that makes all the difference. You can always concentrate on the negative. You can always concentrate on how bad things are, but you can't live that way. I mean, that's a way to die. That's not a way to live. And so when you look at every problem as an opportunity, every issue as a way to move forward, that gives you the ability to do that. I mean, we can all just have pity parties and fall apart, but that doesn't get you anywhere. What gets you somewhere is looking at it in a positive light and moving forward that way. I don't mean Pollyanna, and I don't mean pie in the sky stuff.
Right.
I mean just saying, you know what? It was a bad year. Now let's deal with it and let's move on. Let's figure out where those opportunities are. Let's figure out how to take advantage of where life has left us.
Yeah, that's right. And really, I should be able to quote it, but it's jumped out of my head. I know that Jim Collins wrote about it in his book Good to Great. There was an admiral, and I can't believe I'm forgetting it, but it's really the idea of being able to, you're right, it's not Pollyanna. You got to have an optimistic view of, hey, I can get here. That's kind of the faith component, and this is where I'm going to grow, but also balancing that between a healthy dose of reality, right? That we're in here. So when I work with companies, if they're too Pollyanna, like, we're never going to fail, sometimes they can fail, right? If they don't understand the dynamics of what's happening and how that's changed. Whereas you can go into some companies, Ron, and they're just so focused on, oh gosh, they can't lift their eyes, they can't pull their eyes out of the work, so to speak, or lift their heads up, and then there's no optimism. So you've got to have a healthy balance in doing what I do. Absolutely.
I've got notes. I want to take a look at them here. Prior to launching your business, you were responsible for rehabilitating business lines and markets that were dying. And we're talking about that. I mean, that's realistic today. All you got to do is drive down the street in front of strip malls and what have you. They're, especially restaurants, hard hit. Travel, leisure, all those industries are hit really hard. So it's a reality. But when you entered these markets, the ones that you've helped in the past to try to find growth, was there a checklist? Is there something folks can use today? What were things you focused on when you first arrived at the people you've helped?
Yeah, there was, and I didn't start, day one in leadership, and no one said, well, here's the 4 or 5 things you need to focus on. You just do it through trial and error, and trying to grow and figure those things out. But yeah, I entered markets that weren't doing well, that were in the best of times, Ron, 04, 05, and they just weren't performing. And then I entered a number of markets in the recession, the Great Recession, in 8, 9 through really 12, and especially the world I was in. But here's what I developed over time. I developed kind of a 5-point checklist, and this isn't a perfect list, but it was my list.
Mhm.
The first thing I looked at, Ron, was leadership, and this was the actual frontline leaders, maybe the department leaders. What was their attitude? So really kind of evaluating leadership. The second, and which I wrote the book on, Walk the Sales Plank, it really was around sales. How are we performing? Do we have the skills? Do we need resources? The third thing was always the process. Do we have a process in place to be more successful? And a lot of times that was really, and I kind of use that today in what I do now, but it's really understanding who the target market is. Are we going after them? Do we have a methodical approach to developing business? The fourth was the culture. And there's lots of books being written about that. And you and I could talk for days on culture, but really, are people happy? Were they connected? We did a lot of Gallup surveys, back in those days. And some of those markets that I would take over would have the lowest of lowest scores. I mean, you had people that were on the verge of walking out. It just wasn't, really a good time. And then the fifth really developed, and I'm really proud of this one. The fifth was your connection to community and what you did in the community to be able to connect with people in need and foster that sense of really being an open door type business. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked, but those were typically the 5 places that we really wanted to start as a checklist, if you will.
I love that. I love that. So let's spend a little time there. Leadership, sales, process in place, culture, connection to community. I mean, obviously, all extremely important. Leadership. Let's let's dwell there for a minute. I'd like to
Sure.
dwell a little bit on each one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Leadership. I, you know, we've talked about reading. I love to read, and I can't tell you how many books I've read on leadership. John Maxwell comes to mind, but Zig Ziglar. I mean, there's a zillion authors and
Mhm.
ones that whose names will never come to mind because that's the only book they wrote.
Right.
Lee Iacocca comes to mind. He wrote more than that, but in fact, he wrote 2 of them. The first one was on his experiences at Dodge Chrysler. The other one is Where Have All the Leaders Gone?
Right.
And that was I don't know, early 2000s maybe. And his point was that leadership really has disappeared from the now he's larger enterprise corporations, but to a great extent, we don't see a lot of the leadership things that we read about in the old days, and yet I have a feeling those people are there. They're just not writing books. They don't have um, the guy that wrote for um, yeah, can't think of either name. Uh, you'd know the book and you'd know the name. It's 1920s and I mean it's the classic book on leadership. In any
Oh,
case,
yeah, yeah. So we're thinking about now I made Dale Carnegie, right?
Carnegie. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Carnegie. Yeah, yeah. You almost had a jump out of my head, but yeah, Carnegie wrote the book on, relationships and that, and many have tried to pioneer after that. Absolutely.
Right. So so what are your thoughts? I mean, there are leaders today. I don't. We live in a world where we've got 24/7 information. We've got all this stuff flying at us. Sometimes I think it's just hard to pick out the good from the bad.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, I have a kind of a different take on leadership and leadership development in many senses, but to where you were talking about with books. So we know that your successful CEOs today read, between 45 and 50 books a year. We know that they are always developing themselves in their leadership, and I've modeled that and I've done that for the last 15 to 16 years, in that regard. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, these people all the way to Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, to the age wise, the other, and these individuals and many in between read all the time. So I get asked because I do leadership talks, as you know, and I do a lot of sales talks as well. And so what's the best leadership book, and that type of thing. And here's what I tell, this is the take I have on it. Leadership as a topic is very sexy, right? I mean, people want to attend a leadership keynote or a webinar or something like that. They want to read a great leadership book. And the reality is I don't really read a lot of them. I've read some of them that you alluded to, Jack Welch, I've read some of those and things of that nature. But here's the thing about leadership books, just in not all, just in general, is that it's very philosophical, and it gives you a sense when you read them about, oh, wow, here's something that I really, here's a thought that I need to have, or a concept. Here's what I tell most people, and this is where I think a lot of my success came from, is read a management book. Read a book on management, not necessarily leadership. But the thing is nobody wants to go to talk to a management consultant or a management keynote or a manager. It's not cool, right? But here's what I've always believed, Ron, is that great leadership always follows great management. So if you're a frontline leader and you're listening to this right now, and you're saying, you're being self-aware and saying, look, I don't know how to have a difficult conversation or give a performance review, or how do I get somebody to kind of see my way of thinking, go get a book on that topic, right? And go develop that skill, go blog, go podcast, go read a book, or get a mentor or somebody on that particular topic. And then as you develop as a leader and those skills happen and you're taking care of your people and giving good feedback and, tough conversation, you're doing better, you'll become a better leader. And then be self-aware again and say, okay, what is the skills that I need now? Maybe I need to think more strategically, or I need to be able to execute on something better. Go pick up a book on that and develop your management skills, and leadership will always follow.
Can everybody be a good leader?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But you have to define what that leadership looks like. A lot of times people will look at what I was doing. I was very high up in the corporate world and say, well, that's a leader, right? And I would look to somebody maybe above me and say, well, that's a leader. But the reality is you can be a leader in your house. You can be a leader at a church group. You can be a leader. You have to define leader to your kids. You can define what that is. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is develop the skills that you need to be the best at whatever that definition is. So I believe that everybody can be a leader.
Excellent. That flies in the face of a lot of books I've read on leadership, distinguishing between management and leadership. You can be a good manager gets people. I think one of the more popular ones I see nowadays, it's been around a long time. A good manager gets people to do things the company wants them to do. A good leader gets people to do things for the company that they want to do. And I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, but I think sometimes, Ron, it's just sexy to say that, right? It's like, well, that's cool, because management, there's really, when it comes to like giving, let's just take like tough feedback to a team member, right? Well, there's a lot of books out there. There's, it's evolved a little bit, but not that much. And so the reality is it's easy to say management doesn't work. What I want to make sure that I delineate is that you are taking the time to take a management book to develop a skill that will then in turn make you a better leader. There's nothing wrong with a leadership book. I've probably got one in me down the road, right? But and there's nothing to give you kind of a philosophy on how you want to kind of run an organization and how you want to manage a culture or things of that nature. Nothing wrong with those books. Mm-hmm. I just want to emphasize, it's really for the development of the skills you need to be the best leader. And as long as you don't look at yourself and your leadership any day as a finished product, meaning you're always developing yourself, then you'll always read a better level of book, right? Or a podcast, and then you'll develop the skills that stack on for that next position and that next position or the next place in your organization. Then you're growing as a leader, and anybody can do that. Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind as you talk through that, and I appreciate the distinctions, we always talk about leaders need to have integrity. In fact, that's probably number one. I'm on a board right now that's looking for a CEO. And, one of the top things is we need somebody with integrity.
Right.
But, integrity is important, whether you're the line person on the assembly line or you're, the janitor. It doesn't matter. Integrity is important no matter what you do in life.
That's right.
It's certainly important for leaders, but it's important for everybody else too.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that. Sales. You know, again, I've read tons of books on sales, and I mentioned Zig Ziglar probably wrote some of the best stuff on it. Tommy Hopkins. I'm going back a ways because I don't read them now. I'm past that. Not that I can't learn new things on sales, but I'm comfortable where I'm at. Um, how do you, some people it used to say if somebody, especially if he was kind of slick in any way, oh, that guy's a born salesman,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, and then there was all the argument back in the day, you're not, no one's a born salesman. People learn. It's skills. It's a learned skill. There are people that are shy and sales comes hard. There are people that are not shy and sales comes easy.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean just because you're not shy, you're going to be a good salesperson, or you are shy, you're going to be a bad salesperson. It's skills, or is there more to it than that?
No, no, I mean, it's just as I could almost echo what we were just talking about with leadership. I mean, it's really the development. So where am I getting stuck in the sales process? That type of thing. One of the things that I used to do a lot in the world of sales, and especially when I was in banking, and I kind of do that now because a lot of the people that I do work for and consult for, these are attorneys, they're engineers, they're architects, they're maybe in the construction and of course banking, given my background. And these are people that have a very high level of skill, like knowledge, but they just don't know how to articulate. So sales is the same as leadership. You just need to find or have somebody guide you. Where am I getting stuck? And what is the piece that I absolutely need? And sales has evolved, you're right, from great titans like Zig Ziglar, that wrote books and talked about features and benefits. You remember the old people don't buy a drill bit, they buy a hole, right? You remember, you kind of old features and benefits, and that's evolved now in part because our clients are just more sophisticated. There's more information and things of that nature, and so that you really have to develop skills that have evolved with the times. So sales is really something that I think you have to constantly be asking yourself, am I being effective? Is my target market, does my target market care about what I'm selling? Is it really an advantage? Those types of things. But yeah, the evolution has really changed.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, you talk about, I go into organizations, Ron, and you kind of alluded to it, where people will say, well, I'm an introvert. I'm just not a natural born salesman. And the truth is anybody can sell anything if they they have developed the skills and the training and they have something important to say. Right. If you have something important and you believe in what you're doing, we've all heard this, anybody that even is an introvert can go out and make sales if they have something they care enough about.
That's right.
And yeah, so
Excellent. Processes in place or process in place.
yeah, process. A lot of times, what you'll find is that you can go into organizations that have great, talented people, and they understand that and they know what they do, but they don't have a process in place. So, how many calls do I make, and what is the idea of an effective call? And leaders don't maybe have some type of process in place that says, here's what I need to consciously or intentionally or deliberately do every day to develop maybe my emerging leaders. There's just nothing in place. And I know that there's lots of people that will listen to this and listen to me and think, oh, process, we don't need that. But if you look at any great organization, you look at any great sporting team, I mean, look at, Alabama as an example, just won the national championship last night, right? Clemson talks about this. Some of these great programs, same with great organizations, the coaches all talk about a process. They know where they're going, what they want to accomplish. We want to win a national championship, but it's the fundamental everyday, the deliberate and intentional actions that one takes that moves them towards that is what makes them great. And that's what a lot of organizations miss, is they don't have that. And of course, if you don't have a process, you have nothing to follow up on other than a lagging indicator, which is how many sales did I make or how much revenue. And that's not a model for success.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm struck. I appreciate every bit of that. I bought I won't name the company or the product, but I bought something. It was fairly expensive not too long ago. I called first because I had owned one of these prior, older version,
Okay.
and wanted to make sure that the newer version did everything that I wanted it to do. Well, I get somebody on the phone. First off, it's hard to find the phone number, hard to get them on the phone.
Yeah.
You go through voicemail jungle, to try and get somebody. Then I finally get somebody on the phone, and they give me wrong information. Now, I don't know it's wrong then. I go ahead and buy this unit, expecting it to do exactly what I had wanted it to do and
Right.
had been told it would do, but now it doesn't do that. So I call back, I get somebody else, and of course they don't know the answer to that. So it takes me, by the end of the day, I've talked to half a dozen people. Most of them don't know the answer to it, and they're at least honest enough to tell me they don't know the answer. I had to call back, one, because the call got dropped, and two, because I knew I was at the end of the road with somebody that was blowing smoke, didn't know what to do. So I
Sure.
called back. I finally did get a young lady. I don't know if she's young or not. It's all on the phone, but sounded young. And she just was great. However, she couldn't get it to do all the stuff it was promoted to do.
Right.
I spent the next day and a half, probably, at least it felt that long, getting it to do almost everything I wanted to do. And I had to do things different and set up things different. All that said, this is a technology company, so I expect processes to be in place. They're not. Whether you're talking about a mom and pop that you walk in the door and they don't have a process to help you, or you're on the phone with somebody, mid-sized business, and they're promoting their wares and they want you to do something, regardless of the type of business, the industry, the size of it, it seems to me like most organizations don't have a process in place. They may have an overriding theory or an overriding philosophy, but when you get down into the details, most of these folks, we've all had to stumble through voicemail, regardless of size, just trying to get a human being on the line, or even an artificial intelligence. I don't always need a human being. Artificial intelligence is doing far more than we think it is. I don't care if I get a chat box, as long as they give me decent information.
Yeah. 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 I think a lot of times, the process, when you hear that, again, it's kind of like management, right? It's not that, you know, sexy, if for lack of a better word. And so a lot of times you think, oh, we don't need it, but really, I think that you have to have a model that you follow that makes things intentional and deliberate, whether that's culture, or whether that's sales, or whether it's leadership, that you're always moving forward. You think about your example you just gave, a lot of times leadership gets so far removed from the actual process. Have you ever been on the phone like that and thought, well, I wonder if the CEO of the company had to go through what I'm going through, this
Yeah.
would change, right? Heads would roll, right? And so I think sometimes in leadership, we get so far away from it. If we don't have a process to know whether it's kind of like the dog wagging the tail, are we getting off course? We got to kind of course correct. If you don't have something in place, then you have really nothing to measure your daily actions or monthly actions against. So, yeah.
Yeah. Culture. Boy, we can talk about that all day.
Yeah, culture. As I said, in a lot of these markets, the culture, it was down, and it really was building people up. And yes, we could talk for days on that. I think a lot of times with that, it was really just making sure a culture, I think, is bought and it's intentional. I've always believed that. Bought meaning that a lot of times when things are not going well, that's the first thing a company cuts. Like, oh, we're going to cut out Christmas parties, or we're going to cut out this or that, and it goes to the heart of what gives spirit to the people. And then intentional, I think we talked about this on one of you had me on, where I said when the door clicks behind you, a leader always has to be thinking, what am I going to do today to make sure that I'm living and feeling the culture? And I think it's always bought. I think it's always intentional.
Excellent. Connection to the community. And I love this because I've always been active in communities, chambers, Rotary, nothing against for the other folks, Rotary and
I like Kiwanis and things.
Kiwanis. Thank you.
Yeah.
No slight intended. I just couldn't
Yeah.
bring up the name. I've always loved being a part of the community, you've got to give back. I mean, if you're doing business in a community and you aren't helping that community, then you're just taking. And no
Yeah.
one, I don't know if you're familiar with the Giver series, but I think there's a lot to that. You do need to give back, especially in business, but in everything.
Yeah.
All of us need to learn to give back or know to give back.
That's right.
Um, what What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the mantras that I always had that I think anybody that worked with me or for me would say is that in order to be a leader in the organization, you have to be a leader in the community. And that was just a mantra that I always had. And it started with, that leadership team, let's go out and set the example, and then let's get people involved. And that's when you laugh, and that's when you create relationships and commonality, and a stronger relationship with your team happens outside. When you're doing a paint-a-thon as an example, and you as the leader spill a bucket of paint on yourself, and you got more paint on you than on the house, and everybody's laughing and you're laughing, and it creates these stories, right, that you can carry with you on Monday morning or the next day and things like that. And that's where you really start to engage that community. And then of course the community sees it as well, which is a whole nother subject, but they see the reality of, wow, that company is really involved. They're really connected. Their doors are open, and it's a fun place to walk into.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference, I believe.
That sounded almost personal. Have you ever spilled a bucket of paint on
Oh
yourself?
yeah. I've had more paint on me and stuff like that. And stuff. I've been the butt of a lot of jokes at community functions with my team and stuff. Heck, one time, I can't even believe I'm going to tell you this, but one time I dressed up as a woman, and I had the red heels on. It was one of those walk a mile in her shoes for domestic violence, and I walked through town with other guys. We were all dressed up, but I decided that I was going to go all out and dress as a woman and stuff. So the pictures, and the team made up these fake dollar bills with the picture of me dressed as a woman, and then we had fun with it for years, and stuff like that. So
That's great.
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So all of these are logical places for the listeners to go to grow their business. But how did you know how to prioritize or where to start?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that we make is as leaders, you step in and say, okay, I got to fix them all, and so really that evaluation of doing that. I love this saying. It's a Steve Jobs quote, and Steve Jobs quotes have been probably more overused in a public restroom. I mean, he's highly, highly quoted, but this is the one that I like because it's kind of my philosophy when I work with businesses today. And what he said was, Apple was not just successful because of the things we did. It was the hundreds of things that we had the ability to do that we didn't do.
Yeah.
Right? Being able to say no to things that were tempting and whatnot. And why I answer it that way is because a lot of times you have to decide really quickly, where are my priorities? In most cases, and I still talk to businesses about this today, in most cases, the leadership above me was like, the team didn't know this, but the leadership above me would say, Larry, you got 6 months, 8 months, or a year to turn this around. Otherwise, we may close the place, or you may have to let people go in order to gain profitability. And when I would look those individuals in the eyes, right, I didn't want to fail. And so one of the places that I traditionally always started with was sales and sales process. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to show the people, it's kind of keep the wolves at bay. I want to show the people above me. Now, this is in the corporate world, but I wanted to show them that there was incremental growth. Okay, one, we were turning over stones. Two, people were trained. Now things are going into the pipeline, and so you're just growing. And now we're closing deals in the pipeline, and that's meaningful business. And then what that did for me, Ron, is it gave me time to work on the other 3 or 4 and to focus on those. Plus, what I also found is that when you were showing team success, culture just automatically improved. Leadership improved. All of a sudden, when I ask people, when you're having success, let's go paint a house and see how much paint we can get on ourselves, you had more volunteers. And so it was, you could put 100 leaders and 100 leadership books, and I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me, but that's where I personally always started. And that's probably why I wrote the book. And that's probably why that's the field I play in, is because that really solved a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, after you decided where to focus, did you create buy-in, or did you just set goals and relay them to the team?
Yeah, you get creating buy-in. We were talking about leadership books. There's a lot of books, Ron, out there on vision, right? And casting that vision and things of the nature in that nature. So a lot of what I really tried to do is I tried to tell them, look, this, I jump in and model it. So if I had to go on a call or pre-call or post-call or do whatever to help them win the deal, I rolled up my sleeves and jumped in because we wanted that incremental growth right away, and you want to show your team that you have the ability to do what you're asking them to do. But I'll tell you a story, and I don't know how we are on time, but it's a powerful story. This is day one of the first markets I pull up to, and I'm nervous, right? Because I don't know what the team's going to be like. I don't know what the customer is. All I know is we're losing money. We don't have a lot of time to turn this around. And I pull in, and I spend the morning meeting with the team. Now it's about 12:30. I got to run out and do an errand. Most of the team is gone. There's a teller and a teller supervisor. This is when I was in the banking world. And so they're the only ones there. And I walk out, there's not hardly a car. There's just their cars and mine in the parking lot. Place is empty. So I come back from my quick errand. It's still before 1, and I'm sitting there in the parking lot and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there is nobody in here, right? I thought for a moment, I thought maybe I should park up where the customers do, just to look like somebody, like, right. The place is still open. And I decide, and this is one of the cool decisions I make, I decide that I'm going to park in the back of the parking lot, the farthest slot from the door.
Uh-huh.
And I park there, which clearly it's open, and I walk through this empty parking lot and off I go. Now it's Friday. I think it's like the first week I'm there. The team's all sitting around. We're debriefing on our first week. And now, you always have that employee that's kind of courageous, like they're the spokesperson for everybody. So he speaks up and he says, Larry, he goes, we've been wondering all week. He goes, every time you come in, you always park clear in the back. And why is that? I mean, we don't have any customers here. You can park anywhere you want and stuff like that. And why I said this turned out, I think, in my opinion, to be one of the smartest things I have ever said. And I said, first of all, that's where leaders park. Leaders always park in the back. And this is well before Simon Sinek and Leaders Eat Last. That's where leaders park. And then I told them, I said, I'm making room for all of the customers that we're going to have. I said, someday this parking lot will be full, and the ATM will be full, and the lobby will be full, and all your bankers' offices are going to be full. I said, so I'm going to park back there because I'm going to make room for those customers when they come. And there were 3 or 4 people, Ron, that snickered, right? And those people eventually didn't buy in and, probably went on to other things. But there was a group of people that really understood that and understood that I was making way for customers.
Right.
And every day I parked out there, and every day it was a reminder to the team that I was making room for customers that were going to come. Fast forward, it happened quicker than this, but 7 years later, after that first market, I got the call to come and take over the Arizona market, which was a huge step up, a huge opportunity, or a piece of the Arizona market. And so this was a huge step up. And I remember I was doing some things. It was over about 10:30, ran out for a quick errand. I come back, and Ron, parking lot is full. There's only one place to park, and it's my spot, clear in back. There's 3 or 4 cars standing at the ATM, right? And customers knew me at that time, so they wave and walk in. The lobby is bustling, and I was almost like a senator, walking around shaking hands. People in the lobby are full, and all my bankers have somebody in there talking to them. And I went up there. I can't believe I'm going to tell your listeners this, but I went into my office, and for a moment I wept.
Yeah.
Because I realized it all came true. It just all came true. And it didn't happen because, you read books on vision. It doesn't happen because I sat there, right? And I said, well, this is what's going to happen. Then I never touched it again.
Right.
I think for me, parking in that parking lot, that back slot, what it told everybody was the mission that we're on. There was many other things, but it was a constant reminder of the team that when they pulled in, because eventually my sales staff and the leadership started parking back with me. We all made ways for the customers. And eventually I love telling that story because
It's a great
it
story.
was emotional. Yeah. So.
I want to keep going, but I guess we really need to pause for a moment. I forgot I was in such a hurry to get started. I forgot to identify where people can find us, where we're broadcast on radio. I forgot all that stuff. So rather than go back and re-record all of this,
Yeah.
let me take a quick break here. Let me tell folks, if you're listening to us in Valparaiso, Indiana, or you're in Valparaiso, Indiana, I hope you're listening to us on WVLP. WVLP is a great community station. We just talked about connection to the community, giving back to your community. They're a great radio station that does just that. I hope you take a look at their website, wvlp.org. So you can listen to us on Monday mornings at 8 a.m., 8 to 9, or you can listen to us on Friday afternoons from 1 to 2 p.m. And you can do that if you're in Valpo by tuning to 103.1 FM. I encourage you to stream us at wvlp.org. While you check out the website and how to get involved and be a part of things, you can also click on that little button that streams. You can listen to us there. You can also listen to us on demand, any of the podcast platforms that I'm familiar with. Start with Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and there's 6 or 8 more. Just whatever you're listening to, look for The Information Playground. And I say all 3 words because there's other names out there similar to it. So The Information Playground. I'm Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting, and I underwrite the program. But if you'd like to be a part of that, at least on WVLP, you're welcome to do that. You can also be a part of it on podcast, or you can watch us on YouTube under The Information Playground, and you can be a part of it there. All opportunities to underwrite the program, or if you see other programs you like on WVLP, be a part of that. Be a part of something bigger than yourselves, and that's what this is. Whether you're talking WVLP or whatever. I want to, first off, if you've got questions on the programming WVLP, you'll find the email there, info@wvlp.org. If you got questions on the program itself, ron@ronbushconsulting.com. We're a cybersecurity company, and we help companies protect themselves from cybercrime. Larry, would you tell folks how to reach you? And I guess let's not forget to mention your book, Walk the Sales Plank. You can find it, I assume, in any bookstore. I think I bought it on Amazon.
Yes. Yeah. You can find the book on Amazon. You can get a hold of the easiest way is boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com, direct email to me. So boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com, boilingfrogdevelopment.com, or you can go to Boiling Frog, kept it all consistent, Facebook. The other way, Ron, people connect with me a lot is on LinkedIn, just under Larry Young. You'll find me there, and give you an opportunity where you can message me or email me, and that's the easiest way to reach me.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, let's pick up where we were. We were talking about, and we dwelled quite a bit on leadership, sales, process in place, culture, and connection to community. How did you keep? And I love the story because it kind of answers this next question. You kept, I think, your people motivated by parking out in the boonies, so to speak.
Sure.
It also helped you. I mean, every walk in there, from the back of the parking lot to the office, every walk, you're remembering all the stuff that's going to happen. It's keeping everything front and center.
Yeah.
Not just for everyone else, but for you as well.
Yeah.
How else did you keep people motivated?
Well, it's, there was a long time there, Ron, that I walked through the parking lot and you still never saw any cars, so
Yeah.
the first time you saw a car parking and there are a couple cars parking, you kind of get a little giddy, right? And whatnot. But there are times when I or a team, when you cast a vision where they don't, that the success doesn't come right away, And I had I had a saying that came out of that same meeting, the one where I think I shared last time, where people snickered, and it probably was one of the top 3 or 4 smartest things that I ever came up with as a leader. And it was this. I had this saying that said, "But it won't always be this way."
Mhm.
But it won't always be this way. And so when I told them, I said, I'm parked back there, I'm going to make way, and this is what's going to happen. I said, there will be a day when the parking lot is full and the ATM is full and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you look out there now and there's nobody out there, but it won't always be this way.
Mhm.
And so when you're casting a vision, what I think is really important is not only for them to be able to see it, but then always have the things in place that remind you or them that you're moving in a direction, such as parking in the parking lot. But I use that saying all the time. So if we had maybe a customer that left us, right, that kind of hurt, or we had a team member that we loved was one of us, but took on another opportunity somewhere, or maybe a sales prospect that we went all the way to the 5-yard line, right, and we just didn't get it. A lot of times people get down, but to be able to pat somebody on the back and say, but it won't always be this way. Ron, I know that it stings today because you didn't get that account that you wanted, or you didn't get the client that you wanted, but it won't always be this way.
Yeah.
So it got to a point where the team would say it, like they'd come back and say, boss, we didn't get the deal that we thought. It kind of sucked. We lost out to so-and-so, that type of thing. I'm really disappointed, but Larry, it just won't always be that way. That's right. That's right, Ron. It won't be. And it just eventually, I think why I said I wept is that all of a sudden I realized that it's not that way anymore.
Yeah.
Right. It all came true. And so I think for the leadership lesson in this is the fact that if you're going to cast a vision, it's like a mission statement. Don't just hang it on the wall and never touch it again, because it never shows up. You can't sit on the sofa of life and hope that all your dreams come true. Mm-hmm. Something's got to happen. And so having those consistent things in there, quick one-liners, quick actions that show your team that I, as a leader, still believe in what we're doing no matter what. Mm-hmm. And there were some cases where we would show incremental growth, Ron, but it came slow. I mean, you're a year or two into it, and patience is tough, but I always did those types of things to stay motivated.
I've owned several businesses myself, and I can think back to one of them in particular. I was less than 6 months into this new business, starting from scratch, and I landed $1 million client, $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And they stayed with me for years. In fact, they stayed with me till I sold the business. And when they came on, they almost killed me because I wasn't ready for it.
Right.
There's something to be said for incremental growth. And I know it requires patience. And, I guess we all would like things at the speed we want them. Yeah. It isn't that we want it fast or slow. It's we want it as it comes. Sometimes life just doesn't work that way. Sometimes you're ready for it and those opportunities don't come. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're not ready for it and they come. You blow the deal. Sometimes you get the deal.
Yeah.
I was ready for it up here. I wasn't ready for it in people and materials. You've got to grow that fast. You got to have capital because things are required and they're required quickly.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. I managed to pull it off, and the business grew, and they weren't the only client like that I had. But business is just a funny thing. You can get what you want and then wish you had gotten it a little later or a little slower drips or what have you.
I think too, Ron, you always have setbacks on the way to your vision too. And so I always kind of had this internal thing. This is old school now, but it's kind of like the waltz, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, mm-hmm. and you either lose something or you be gaining some traction. And there was a period in there for, I think, about 3 years where I had 4 of my bankers that went to the competition and became either market presidents or senior vice presidents. And it was one of those things where you're happy for them as people because you've come to be close to them, but it's a huge setback for you, and so now you got to replace those. So you can have incremental growth in sales or even fast growth in sales, but sometimes like the leadership, the culture, the community connection just didn't come at the pace that I wanted it to. That type of thing. Sales pretty much did because I had it down, right? I knew what we needed to do. I knew what processes and that type, but sometimes leadership development, you take step backs. or people don't buy into what you're doing, and they leave, I mean, that hurts. And so nothing ever goes really at the speed other than the deliberate and intentional process. Those are things you can control. And if you fundamentally as a leader control those things every day and focus on those things that are there to enhance the customer experience, your people's experience, the value that you create for a client, if those processes are in place, you do those, eventually the parking lot will fill up.
I love that.
Yeah.
Years ago, I worked for a guy that was he was a big thinker, um, vision guy, and he had no use for task-oriented people or detail-oriented people.
Yeah.
And I've always considered myself kind of a freak, I guess, a kind of a schizophrenic. I mean, I love the clouds. I love being 30,000 foot and able to look out over the horizon and say, yes, this is the grand vision. But I also know from practical experience that the details will take off your rear end if you're not taking care of them. So you've got to do both. This guy, it was an experience working for him, and I was one of the few people that could get along with him. He scared everybody else to death, and I look back on those days and I think, here's a guy that could have been a great leader, but he failed to connect with his people. He failed to appreciate the ones that complimented him. He only wanted people that looked like him.
Right.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
So earlier you were talking about a fearless environment. You can't be afraid of things. And I kind of wish we'd evolved or developed that a little more. What does it mean to you and how did you create it? And give us an example if you can.
Yeah. So being in a fearless environment, I just did a keynote on this, but it really is your kind of your people's ability to be able to try things and fail, and they're not beat up for it. I was just, it wasn't that long ago, one of my boys, went and took their learner's permit, right? And so they don't have to drive; they just have to go take the questions. They got to get 20 out of 25 right.
Yeah.
And he studied so and stuff, and so I took him and I left here and went and took him to it, and sure enough, Ron, he fails it, right? He misses by one.
Uh-huh.
And of course, as a dad, I'm kind of mad, right? Because I've taken 2.5 hours waiting at the DMV to get this done. I know that he didn't study very well, that type of stuff, and he fails a test, so now we got to go back again. But Ron, it was a look on my son's face when he approached me to tell me. I could see he was just seething mad. He's like, Dad, I missed it by one. The kid was mad.
Yeah.
And I realized at that time that I don't need to say anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a personal story, but it's applicable, I think, for us as leaders, is that you have to be able to allow somebody to fail so that they and be fearless about it, because it allows them to be able to develop. When they make the connection, like, hey, the reason I didn't win that big deal is because I wasn't prepared for this or that. That is a strong place to be. Now, I'll tell you that when I first would take over a market, I didn't allow that as much. There was less of the fearless, because it was about winning, which meant that I would go on the calls, or I would heavily pre-call them or post-call them to stack them up for success. And I wanted them to be able to do that because we had to have the wins right away. Right. But there's developing that fearless leadership and allow them to be able to do that is very powerful, because it's where they grow. So on the sales front, here's a kind of a concept I share with businesses, and I will with your listeners around this fearless, is that when you think about in sales, if you have one deal in your pipeline, and this deal is, let's say it's a year maker or a quarter maker or whatever, a sales professional will typically they'll fixate, right? They'll over strategize and they'll put pressure on the client to close, and they just get so consumed because that's it, right? And what ends up happening is, let's say that they don't win the deal, it's devastating, right? Because they have nothing in their pipeline. But even when they win the deal, a lot of times they haven't done that process. They haven't followed that because they're so consumed with this. So one of the philosophies that I always had in developing people was have an immense amount of deals in your pipeline. In this scenario, have 5 of them, because if you lose one, it's not as big a deal. Now, that's kind of a duh statement, because naturally, if you have more in your pipeline, you're going to do better. But here's the lesson, is that when you have a turnover a lot of rocks in your business, and you always prospecting, and you got something intentional in place, you don't necessarily create a sales organization. What you create is a learning organization, because now they're not afraid to fail. Now they're okay at trying something. Now they understand, okay, it's not always going to be this way, right? I just lost that one. Now, what did I learn in order to go get the next one? And that's how you rapidly develop people, is by having them turn over enough at bats or enough rocks. But it also creates that fearless environment that, hey, I can afford to lose this one or try something new to get better and learn from it. So
that's excellent.
yeah.
I can remember a guy I worked for. I did a little stint in financial planning back in the 80s, about 5-7 years. And the guy that I first went to work for was just a piece of work, but he had some, like everyone, he had some really good ideas. And one of them, right at the beginning, because I'd never sold anything before, and I was an IT guy, I was a geek. And back when they still called it DP, I was there. So here I am. I've made money. I've done well, and I decide I'm going to invest. And that's how I meet the guy. He's teaching a course on investments. He's also a general agent for an insurance company, and he does investments. He's got his own financial planning company. So that's where I start. I didn't stay there. I went on to other, but I started there, and the guy would go out on every sales call. And after every call, we would sit in the car and we would dissect it. Yeah. What happened here? What'd you do here? What'd you say there? What did they respond? I mean, it was, in the beginning, it was really painful. I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff. Yeah. But I got to tell you, you learn in that environment. There's a book I'm about halfway through right now called Range. And it's about how generalists prosper and are, we've kind of, with IT and all the technology we have today, we've kind of focused on people who are specialists, whether you're talking Tiger Woods in golf, or you're talking Zuckerberg in Facebook. We're talking about somebody who, this is their lane and they stay in it. And what this guy's premise is you can succeed much bigger and better and be happier if you're more well-rounded. And he gets into all different proofs of that, surveys and everything else. One of the studies that he quotes in there is made on children in school. And what happens is, teacher comes in, gives them a bunch of problems, we'll say math problems, writes it on the board, teaches them how to do it, and then gives them a quiz. Well, they do great because they just saw it on the board. Right. Now, if you give them that same quiz next week, well, they don't remember all of that because they haven't lived there. Different class, same quiz. Teacher comes in, explains it, does 1 or 2 problems, and then says, next week, you're going to have a quiz on this. They don't do near as well, but they learn through that. And what happens is, when you do fail at something, or when you struggle with something, you seem to remember it. It seems to stick. And so, I mean, that's his point in that particular chapter, is just because you're struggling with something doesn't mean or you fail at it, doesn't mean you're doomed to always fail at that. You're learning. You're learning through every bit of that. And now next time you go out, next time you're going to do better. And the time after that, it's a constant state of improvement. I think today more than any other day, but I think it's always been true, we need to develop a lifelong love of learning. If you don't, then you just stagnate and die. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Good point. So after you've got the sales and the process in place, so what leadership quality do you think is important in developing people?
Mm. That's a good question. I think that I think you just touched on it. I think that when you build that fearless culture, you build a learning culture, whether that's pre-calls or, like you said, post calls with your boss. That you understand that every event that you have is a learning culture. I think the thing for us as leaders, as executive leaders, I mean, somebody told me this a long time, and I did a long time ago. I didn't listen in my first few years. I wish I would have, but it's follow up. You know, the fortune is always in the follow up. And so when you have a process in place and people are learning, I think it's important for your front, and this is for all, but for your frontline people to make sure they're learning, pick up a manager book, learn a skill, be self-aware, help them be self-aware. Here's a skill you're working on. Follow up for us. I also think too that a lot of times when the sales would get, when I would get the sales and the process down, the next thing that I typically would turn to, and we touched on it last time, was the focus on community.
Yeah.
And it was important for us to really focus. There were times when I would first take over a market and we'd go, like I said, go paint a house or something, and I'd have 3 people show up, and a lot of times it was just the leaders and maybe someone else. But when you spill paint all over yourself,
Uh-huh.
what I would always tell people is, I said, intentional and it's bought. So a lot of times, if appropriate, we would go, whether it was a 501 or after the event, we go kind of celebrate the fact we did something good in the community and whatnot. And then I would always tell them, let's make sure that everybody at the bank knows that we had a good time last time.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is they would go out and they would tell their people, the people in their groups, like, oh, you should have saw Larry, he got paint all over himself, or he fell off a ladder, whatever the case was,
Uh-huh.
so to speak. And pretty soon 3 turned into 6, and then it was 16. And then there were times when, like Habitat for Humanity, we, instead of building 1 house, we had enough volunteers to build 2. There was a time when there was flooding in one of our markets, and I had 140 team members show up in our shirts, and were sandbagging to save homes in our community.
Wow.
And you want to talk about making an impact where you get recognized in service organizations, but yet even just the fulfillment of us trying to help people is such a powerful thing.
Wow.
And so community is always a big thing for me. Yeah.
That's an incredible story. What's one of the shocking things you learned in leadership, and what changes or changes?
Shocking. You say shocking. There's lots of valuable lessons I learned. One of the most shocking things, if you want something like that, is I left. I was about a year into one of my markets, and I sat the team down and I said, look, what I want you to do is I want you to write down 2 or 3 things that I do well. And then I want you to write 2 or 3 things that I don't do well. I'm talking about the things you wish you could say to me, but you just don't have the courage. And then what I want you to do is I want you to give them to Susan, my assistant, and she's going to type them. So I don't know who wrote them. I don't care to know. And I promise you, hand on a Bible, that I will not ask Susan who wrote them. I don't care. I want stuff to make me better. Now, HR would not have approved of me doing this, but I did it anyways. And so I left. I took a week off, and it was on a Thursday. And I remember looking at my BlackBerry. That's how long ago this was. So it was my BlackBerry. And I see the email come in, and I look at the attachment, and I start reading it. And my first reaction was, this is a load of, I don't focus on the things I do well. I go right to the things that I don't do well. And I'm like, this isn't what I wanted. I don't want to say, I don't think I said it was stupid, but I'm like, this isn't going to give me anything that I want. And so I'm sitting there, and of course now it's Friday and it's the weekend before I'm set to return. And I start thinking more about it. I'm like, wait a minute, this is important to them. This isn't about me. This is about what they're telling me I'm not doing well. Maybe you take this serious. And one of the things your question was, which was shocking, we're having all this success. We're doing the community connections, right? And leadership and all this stuff. Culture is really built up. And the one thing that was resounding in there is Larry is all business. He doesn't appear to care about my family. And then when I first heard that, I thought, well, that's a load of crap. I care about their families, right? I mean, come on, I'm not just all business, right? But I stopped and I thought about it, Ron, and I'm like, look, this is what they're telling me. And so I pulled him in on Monday. I said, I had a chance to look over this, and the feedback I got was fabulous. Some of it was shocking for me. And so what I want you all to know is that I am taking this serious. So if it seems a little awkward and there's some things that you see that I'm changing, it's because I care. So I just prefaced it. Because I knew it would be awkward when I'm going up to Ron and say, Ron, tell me about your wife and kids. They know the game is up, right? But I set it up, and it was really amazing at what was shocking about it is not only the impact it had on the team, but how it changed me,
Yeah.
how it changed me as a leader, because all of a sudden I saw, whether it was John or Joanne or Brenda or Rita or whoever it was, I just saw them in a different light. And
Right.
everything wasn't all business then. See, I thought that as a leader, that's what they wanted from me. I thought that they wanted me to show them how to be successful, how to make incentive, or whatever the case was, and to have a good environment, have a good culture. I thought that that's what they wanted from me, but what they really wanted was more.
Yeah.
They wanted something that cared about the other part of them that was outside of the walls of the bank. And that was probably the most shocking thing I learned.
Gosh, what an excellent story.
It
Excellent.
was a great way to develop my leadership, and help me. So, yeah.
We're coming down to the wire.
Okay.
So, what do you think's one of the most important leadership skills that one should develop? What really makes the difference?
Okay. So I think you had said integrity, and I just go into the assumption that people have integrity, and so when I don't say that, it doesn't mean it's not important. I think a great leader needs actually two things. One is empathy, and that developed over time, and that's just your ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, whether you're training on sales or you're trying to develop emerging leader. Empathy is extremely important. And I think the second thing, which is the most overlooked thing when I go into markets, when I go do what I do now, and it's execution. Everybody loves to think at the 20,000-foot level about the clouds, and there's no shortage in this world for ideas, right? But
Right.
what we're short on is we're short on execution,
Yeah.
and people actually just rolling up their sleeves and getting it done. You
Well,
focus on those two things at a high level, you'll do well.
I'm going to make a note of that.
Yeah. Empathy and execution, the two E's. That might just have to be my next book, Ron.
I like.
I gotta execute on it. So, yeah.
So last one, we talked about how you focused on the organization and your people, but what about the development of your own leadership?
Oh, wow.
How did you stay motivated to keep developing your leadership?
There's a philosophy that I've had for a long time, and I still have it today. I wake up each morning, and I sometimes fail at this, but I wake up each morning and I never view myself as a finished product. So I know that I'm always in motion. Today, who I am and who I am as a leader and an entrepreneur and everything else, a father, and all those things, I'm not a finished product. So I'm always evolving, I'm always learning, and I'm always growing. And then the other thing that I did in the business world, especially, well, I do it in the personal world. Never fail twice in a row.
Mhm.
Just never fail twice in a row. If you do something wrong, understand it, fix it, that type of thing, but just try not to fail twice in a row on something. And those always bode well for me as we were growing businesses. And I think it helps me grow as a leader, so that you don't stay in the rut of I'm always making this mistake. Just like the story I told you about caring about their people, that never happened again.
Mhm.
I put processes in place to make sure that I knew their family. I cared about it. I went to their family events. I went to the graduations. We did the community thing, and then I would invite their spouses to come, their kids to come afterwards and grill hamburgers. But my point is, I never failed twice at something, because then it just became what I did for the rest of rest of my career. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's been great having you, as always. Um, I'm going to have to wind up. We kind of went to the end of the time, so I'm going to have to run through this. I hope that you'll continue to join us either on demand on YouTube or on any of the podcast stations under the Information Playground, or watch us, or listen to us on WVLP, WVLP.org. It's a great radio station. Take some time, get to know them, get involved. Um, Larry, tell folks how to reach you again.
Yeah, Boiling Frog Development at gmail.com, Facebook at Boiling Frog Development, website boilingfrogdevelopment.com are just the easiest ways, or LinkedIn at Larry Young. You'll find me.
Excellent. And I'm Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting. Please check out our website, ronbushconsulting.com, and join us next time at the Information Playground. Thank you.